Today, I've got somebody who was a W-2 guy for a long time, was able to build a multi-million-dollar portfolio in less than 2 years and retire. With your rental portfolio, how did this all start?
I went and bought my first house and actually house hacked. And that was kind of my first aha moment where I was like, somebody else paying for my property. It's free. House hacked another one about 18 months later.
Where are you buying properties that cash flow? Because this is like the big problem today.
So if your goal is cash flow, the market has to cash flow. And so the way that I teach my students how to do this is...
I got Blake Choisnet.
Choisnet.
Dude, I cannot believe that that's how it's pronounced.
For real. Yeah. I mean, I've got, I don't know, maybe 5 people that have got it right the very first time, and they're all fluent in French.
So, dude, you had a W-2 job, right? You were able to start building wealth in real estate. You got 40 properties now, cash flowing, helping people grow their rental portfolios and everything else. So I'm excited to talk to you about that because a lot of people think I hate on rentals, which sometimes I do, but it's not that I'm against them. Like, they work. It's just like I like wholesaling better. So with your rental portfolio, how did this all start? I mean, because you're working a W-2 job. What inspired you to get into real estate? Why'd you even go down this path?
Yeah, I was living in Austin, Texas, and it was kind of a boom. I lived there for about a decade working for a tech company there, and really enjoyed it. But a lot of my friends were just saying, man, I wish I would have bought 5 years ago. I should have bought 5 years ago. And I'm thinking, well, we're probably going to say the same thing in 5 years. It doesn't look like anything's changing. So I went and bought my first house and actually house hacked. And that was kind of my first aha moment where I was like, somebody else paying for my property. It's free. I'm making a little bit of money because I was renting it out to my buddies.
Yep.
And so then I started thinking, well, how could I do this faster? You know, if I just bought house hacked one property every year for 15 years, I'm on a 15-year note. In 15 years, I'm good.
You know what's funny about that is like, isn't it funny how small, like, minded we think when we're first starting? Because I used to think that. I was like, dude, if I could just flip like a couple houses a year and make like $100,000, I'm square.
Yeah.
Right. And then, like, I think a lot of people listening now are like, yeah, dude, like one house a year, 15 years, I'm good.
Yeah.
But then
it's almost like in your journey, and this probably happened with you too, like your eyes kind of come up out of the bushes and you see a vision for this new thing and you're like, you can't go back.
Yeah.
You know, because you saw this. That was the first thing was, I could be done in 15 years. And then I started thinking, how can I do that a little bit faster? You know, and then I started looking, I need a cash flow market. How do I do that? And then and I didn't have any money. That was a prohibitor at first. So I saved up 10 grand of what I called stupid money, just kind of tuition to the School of Hard Knocks. And I paid it. My first contractor walked off with 12 grand. And,
I've been there.
But I, kept rolling and, and then just kind of scaled from there, kept buying.
Was it like a house a year at first, or like did it go quicker than that? What happened?
I house hacked my first one, then house hacked another one about 18 months later, and was, what do I do? I bought a property in Waco with a partner, and then I started I bought 2 properties at first. Those were like my first real BRRRRs, borrowed private money from somebody, a buddy's uncle. I didn't know how to institute. I just downloaded a promissory note off Google.
Yeah, where did you even learn about the concept of private money?
Podcasts, books, and stuff like that. And I was just like, let's just try. And I had a buddy who we were starting investing around the same time.
What year was this?
And this is 2018.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
2018, 2019. And I was like, okay, somebody else can fund it. All right. So I borrowed those, bought my first property for $18,500, put $24,000 into it, and it appraised at $110,000. And then I cashed some out, went and bought a couple more properties, and then it just kind of steamrolled from there. But mostly using the BRRRR method, and then every now and again I'd refi out some equity and go buy some more turnkeys and just try and keep as much money into the properties as possible.
Got it. So at what point did you actually quit your job during this part?
I quit my job. Well, I was, even though we had enough cash flow coming in to cover all the bills, I was still just scared.
Yeah.
So I started investing, and then a couple years after that, I met my now wife, Brittany, and we had met years prior at a friend's wedding, but she's out of my league. I was like,
you didn't have the game yet. Now you got a couple rental properties under your belt. And you talk a big game.
Got a little mojo. Yeah. And so we reconnected, started dating, and and then got married. And pretty soon after that, we got married during COVID. And so everything shut down. We planned 5 weddings in 4 months.
Dang.
First it was, you can only have 250 people. And we were like, we didn't even like those people anyway. And then it was 100, and then it was 10. We got married in our backyard.
Yeah.
Near our house is a parking lot. So we had cars parked in the parking lot, and she walked down the aisle and everything. And soon after that,
I just think back to that time. It's so stupid.
It's freaking crazy.
So stupid what was going on.
Crazy.
Okay.
So we did a honeymoon that next week. Where because you couldn't go anywhere.
I know. I'm just thinking about how stupid this was back then.
Yeah, dude. And, I mean, if there's one time to be sequestered, it's newlywed life. It's not a bad deal. But so our friends sent us in happy hour and DoorDashed us, ice cream and stuff like that. And it was really kind of them. And then we went to the beach and rented a place. And I was thinking, maybe should I do it? Should I not retire? Whatnot? And my wife just said, it's time. It's just time for something new. And she's just kind of always been my courage giver. And I think my biggest fear was rooted in the fact that my dad, he went to the bank every morning. He was in finance. He was in his suit. And so that's almost kind of what I saw as what manhood was, what masculinity was, leadership, family leadership was, is you go to work, and you don't not work, and quit your job, especially a good 6-figure job. And right at the start of the pandemic, I remember telling a couple of my more experienced, more tenured coworkers I was quitting, and they were like, it's an interesting time to quit a really good job while everybody else is melting down. But yeah, I decided to quit then. And then, the coaching stuff just kind of came out of that, because similar to you, a lot of people saying, teach me what you're doing, help me. And it just got prohibitive to my lifestyle, where I was like, I got this awesome wife. I want to hang out with her, and I can't spend all my time doing one-on-one with people. And so it just kind of, guys just kind of wired me as a coach and a mentor. And so it just kind of came from that.
Got it. So you retired around a little after COVID. Mm-hmm. You kept buying more properties. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I think, obviously you had enough cash flow from the rentals, but correct me if I'm wrong, you started this coaching business, probably started using that money to buy more rentals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
using
just
some of that,
play.
just putting it in, basically just chucking it away into rentals. We lived off our passive income, and then take all active income, put it back into properties, and just kept going from there. Yeah.
So where are you buying properties that cash flow? Because this is like the big problem today. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have been told, hey, I should buy rental properties. I should, get cash flow and all this stuff. And I'm over here like, guys, most markets do not cash flow today. Mm-hmm. Like, if that's your plan for cash flow, get a better plan. And it's not to say like rentals are bad. It's just like for cash flow, it's really difficult right now. So like, how are you finding any cash flow?
Well, you're right. Most markets are not cash flow markets. They're bad for cash flow. And
you'll lose.
Especially the ones that are on the top list, like the Austins, Portlands. They're just measuring property value growth, but not value for cash flow ability. So if your goal is cash flow, the market has to cash flow. And so the way that I teach my students how to do this is, if we're looking at a single family home and we want to know, will that property cash flow, the best analog for that, just quick metric, is rent to price ratio, right? So rent divided by price. If we could somehow figure that out for the market as a whole, and it was above 1%, that means the average for that market would be about break-even property.
So just so everyone's aware, rent to price ratio, 1%, that would be, a $200,000 property would rent for $2,000 a month, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the challenge with these bigger markets, even Vegas, like where we're at, is if home prices go up linearly, rent doesn't track with them. It tails off, because if you have a 1% property, which is probably not going to cash flow, it's going to be break even, especially with today's rates.
Yep.
If it's a $500,000 house, that's a $5,000 a month rent. Who's going to pay for that for a rent property? Not very many people.
Yeah, here in Vegas, a $500,000 home's renting for about $2,500.
Right. Yeah. So
we're at 0.5.
They'd be able to buy the house before that. So it tails off. But there are some markets where you could buy a $90,000 house and rent it for $1,500 a month. And now that's a single family home. And you might say, well, those properties are probably holes in the wall and there's rats everywhere. They're nice properties. They're in great shape. They're turnkey properties. And so I'm seeing for some markets, you'll find the rent to price ratio at the market level, say median rent divided by median 3-bed property value, is 1.2, 1.3%.
Yep.
Places like Akron, Ohio, I had a student go to 0 to 8 doors in 90 days in Akron, Ohio, $2,700 a month cash flow. And this is like legit cash flow, like rent minus all expenses, not just the vanity cash flow.
Let's talk about that, because I think people don't even understand that part of like why it's so hard to cash flow. Because it's not just, oh, well, what's my mortgage and what's the rent? It's like, no, are you factoring in vacancy, repairs, all these things are going to happen. So it's like, let's just take the 1.2, 1.3x that you're seeing. So that would mean you're looking at properties that are maybe $100,000 and they're renting for $1,200. So what does the math look like to you?
Math on that for a $100,000 property, if your principal is around $800 or $80,000.
So you're putting $20K down.
Right. So, or if you're doing a BRRRR, you're refinancing out and leaving 20 grand in.
Right.
So your mortgage payment on that's going to be around, principal and interest is going to be around $500 with today's rates, give or take, depending on the rate. So now you're at $700 left, and then you've got maybe another 40% in all expenses. So that's insurance, taxes, property management, actual expenses, and then saving for vacancy, saving for CapEx, and those things. And then at the bottom end, you're looking at maybe a property like that, a 1.2% is probably $150 or $200 a month cash flow. But there are some of these that you can get in at the $90,000, $100,000 mark, and they're renting for $1,500 a month. Even some of the HUD properties, because of the way that the HUD system is structured, some of them will actually rent for more than the open market would really support. I've got a property in Abilene that, if on the open market, I'd really only be able to rent it for $1,100, but HUD will pay $1,414 for it. So I can actually cash flow.
Now, when you're talking about HUD, are you talking about Section 8?
Yeah,
Yep.
the
Just
voucher
so everyone
program.
knows.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so HUD and Section 8, I use those kind of synonymously, where HUD is the Housing and Urban Development Committee that kind of institutes the legislation, which is Section 8 that says the federal government can pay for somebody's housing. So,
Yep.
but yeah, those types of markets, I see great deals in Akron, Ohio, even Toledo and Dayton, Birmingham, Alabama, some in Montgomery. Deal flows slower in Montgomery, Jackson, Mississippi, Macon, Georgia. I think there's probably 50 to maybe up to 100 cash flow markets in the United States.
Yeah, there's not that many.
My background is engineering, so I've got degrees in aerospace and mechanical engineering. And I know we talked about music. I started in music in university, but so the reason I share that is I've got the data nerd in me, and so I've pulled hundreds of thousands of data points on markets just because I'm trying to figure out how can I make this simple and reproducible for people. And but essentially, if you do that rent to price ratio thing and it's 0.8 or below, just throw it away. It's not gonna
It ain't going to do it.
There's just no way.
Yeah. That's what I tell people. So, if there's only 50 to 100, markets out there, on a good deal, right? Well, okay, so let me make some assumptions and let me know if I'm correct. Most of these markets are obviously lower priced homes. Would you say that? Like sub 200K?
Lower price of entry. Yeah. So if the median home price is above 200K, it's
not
probably
going to
not
make
going
it.
to cash flow. Yeah.
Yep.
It might, but 95% of them are going to be below that.
Yeah.
And I tell people focus on population between 50,000 and 250,000 people.
Right, because any kind of metro is going to be too high.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at sub 200K price points. What are you seeing with appreciation in those markets? Because one of the arguments is appreciation versus cash flow. It's hard to get both.
Yeah, it's almost like, when you think of property class A, B, C, and D, where D is going to be higher on cash flow, lower on appreciation.
Yeah.
And A is going to be real low on cash flow, but great on appreciation.
Yep.
You're going to make that trade-off too. And so my goal going in when I first started was I said, I want cash flow. Low price of entry was my next goal, and then moderate appreciation. I'm not asking for 10%. I just don't want it to decline in value. You know? I don't
want to be where everyone's leaving and
right.
There's less demand.
And so right now, I think one thing that is really interesting is appreciation has really two main components. One being that the market becomes intrinsically more valuable, or maybe that property, or that neighborhood, or that subdivision. But the other, which is really interesting over the last 3 years, is we printed so much money that the dollar value is changing. And so home prices keep going up, not just because the market that you're investing in is getting way better, but the dollar value is changing too. So even in these areas for the properties that I own in maybe C and some like D plus areas, they're still appreciating reasonably well, but it's not going to be the 7, 10% that something else might.
They're not declining.
3, maybe 5%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just think for anyone listening, that's the choice you have to make, right? I mean, it's like if you want cash flow in today's market for real estate, it's like you're probably going to be in C markets, right? I was always a guy, because I've bought everywhere. I've bought C markets, D markets. I think Vegas is an A market. And so I've seen like all worlds. And personally, before rates became what they became, I was just like A market all day. Like for me, give me a Vegas all day. I could care less if it breaks even or not. Well, not break even or not, but like I know it's not going to cash flow.
Right.
But with low rates back then, if it could at least break even, then I'll be happy, right? And then 5 years from now, it will actually cash flow, and because our rent growth is good. But that being said, today it just doesn't make sense, and I don't know when it's going to make sense. So when people ask me like, "Are you buying rentals?" I'm like, "No, I'm just not." Like, I don't personally want to buy, in C markets. It's just not part of my business plan because I'm busy focusing on all the things we're doing. Like for me, it's just so much easier to just wholesale one deal a month and go make 15K, 20K, and like, there's my cash flow.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And not to say that one is right or one is wrong. It's just like, at the end of the day, I kind of like try to distill it and just say, well, what's the goal here? Like, what are we trying to do? We're just trying to make money with real estate. So it's like, well, how much you want to make 15K? Well, here's many paths. Wholesale a deal, flip a house.
I think that's the biggest challenge that a new investor has is you talk to 10 different people, they're all going to tell you 10 different answers as to what they have to do. And that's because that person's thinking about through their goals and their lens. And so if your goal is, I want to quit my job in 2 months, your strategy should look different than if you're saying, I just want to be work optional in, 15 years, or I want to be able to provide for my kids' college, or, I want to build some wealth or have some tax advantages, or like it. If you're starting with 10 grand versus $500,000, you should use different strategies. So
one thing I've noticed, and I talked to Michael Zuber about this, so he's been on the podcast a few times, one rental at a time, and you guys remind me of each other in that, you both came from like corporate America type backgrounds and started buying rentals while you were there, and so kind of similar stories. And one thing that's just always been like, I don't know if you'd call this like a bias or a stereotype, but I've always felt like people who have really good jobs are more drawn to just buying rental properties and trying to cash flow that way, because those people are like kind of career-based people and they don't want to really quit. I mean, maybe they'd want to, but maybe they have golden handcuffs or whatever the case is. And they're like, yeah, it'd be nice to quit, but like, man, dude, I'm making 200 grand a year, 250 grand a year. Like, I'm good. I just want to buy a couple of properties. And then it's like the people that I attract a lot are like me, where I've never had a job. Like I always hustle. And these people, like, they come to my workshops and they're like, bro, I'm trying to quit tomorrow. And I'm like, well, if you want to quit tomorrow, you need to replace your active income with a new form.
Well, I'll send you all my people that when we talk to them, they're like, I want to quit tomorrow. I'm always like, I'm not the solution.
Exactly.
For you,
Well, we'll give you an affiliate.
Yeah.
But that's like, it goes back to your point of both answers are correct. It's just, what are your goals?
Yeah. You've got to define what's your lifestyle that you want to pursue first, and then what are the goals, and then what are your constraints? If your constraints are, I'm literally starting with no money, you can still do it. You just have to you got to take a different approach, as opposed to if you inherited a bunch of money or starting with 500 grand, then you've got more flexibility and options, and options are good.
Yeah. What have you seen from Section 8? Because that's like a trending thing that, you hear a lot of people talking about. And I mean, you just mentioned it, like you're getting great returns on that. I mean, what have you seen as the pros and the cons? Because you're in a lot of these markets where Section 8 is probably huge.
Section 8 can be good. Usually, if someone is saying that it's like one end of the spectrum, either it's like horrible, it's never going to work, or it's the answer to all your prayers. They're probably both just wrong. Which is one challenge of just our culture today is like the polarizing nature. The reality is you live in the gray. Like there are some trade-offs in that tenants that come through HUD or are in the Section 8 program, they are generally harder on the properties. The same way that if you rent to someone for $900 a month is going to be harder on a property than someone who's renting one of the luxury properties that you're selling.
Yep.
That's just the thing. The more income someone has, they tend to take, on average, better care of their stuff.
Well, also too, when it's their money on the line,
Yeah,
like with Section 8, they are just being given it.
Right. Yeah. So that's one. But the other side is they're not as hard. They're not as bad tenants as people might say they are, because most of these people have been on a list for about 2 years on average. And so when I was living in Austin, I worked with some inner city kids on the east side of Austin. 76% of those kids don't know their dad. And so I was doing some mentoring in that area. And one of the families there, it was a mom and her husband, sort of boyfriend, or sort of husband, but not technically, and 4 kids living in a one bedroom apartment. Paying $850 a month, and then they got on HUD and they got a 4-bed 2-bath, and they were coming out of pocket $100 a month. Do they want to lose that property? No, they really don't want to go back to a 1-bedroom with 6 people in it.
Yeah,
and so they'll do their best to take care of it. Now, you get your bad eggs, but even you get your bad eggs with tenants without that. So without HUD. So the nice part about HUD is, now, it doesn't work in every area, particularly the nicer areas that are higher property taxes, better. HUD is going to pay less than market average would.
Really?
But there is some areas that HUD would actually pay more than what the market would typically
That's what
support.
I thought it always was. They're willing to pay more.
No. So they will usually, and this will vary by local housing authorities, the way that they institute the payment. So the Housing and Urban Development Committee will say, this is what we've got to spend, and then they go through and they do their analysis and say, this is fair market rent for this area. And then it kind of trickles down. And so there are some areas where maybe in this circle, in one area of that chunk, the property values for rent are really high. But the average that they've said is fair market rent's $1,500 a month. So in one area, you could, on the open market, get $2,200 a month. But in a different subsection of that, you could only get $1,100, but HUD will actually pay $1,500 a month.
They just take the average of both combined.
Essentially. So it's the challenge of implementing something like that at scale. Gives you some luxuries. The other thing that's nice about HUD is it's really easy to increase rent, because HUD tells you what the vouchers are going to be at the beginning of every year. So at the end of a 12-month lease, if you increase rent, the tenant's actually not going to pay anymore. So if they're only paying $50 a month of their rent or $100 a month out of their pocket, you can increase rent. They don't care, and you end up getting more in the increase, even if it is just 5%. They're not going to be like, well, fine, I'm moving. It's not going to cost me anything more. So there's pros and cons of it. Yeah, they're harder, but sometimes you can cash flow more, and it's easier to increase rent.
Yeah. How long do tenants usually stay with you?
If for the good ones on the Section 8, they'll stay a few years, maybe 3 years. If they're going to be a bad tenant, you usually find out pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that for people who don't know. Like, what is it like when you get a bad tenant?
Yeah. I've got I outsource this to my property manager and basically say, like, you do the screening and everything, because I don't want to do that. But it's a headache, because if they start not paying their rent, and this is one thing that's really challenging if you're self-managing. If you're a good person, you got a good heart, you're gonna try and help people, and then someone tells you this sob story, and you're like, "Oh man, your dog just died. Like, I'm so sorry. No wonder you're 6 months late on rent. I should not even consider asking you for rent." You're just gonna get in a really tight spot, and so that's one reason why I delegate to my property manager. But if they're late on rent consistently and then they keep pushing back, you just have to move forward with eviction. And if if they're not generally people don't like to be evicted, and so then you run into them kicking holes in the wall, because they think that the landlord is BlackRock or State Street or Vanguard, when really it's usually a mom and pop landlord, and the average landlord has less than 4 doors. It's not someone just rolling in money, laughing at their demise. But yeah, so then you got repairs and you got to do make ready and stuff. So it can really take a chunk out of your cash flow and essentially your CapEx holdback.
Yeah. How do you think about like somebody's financial situation if they're going to get a rental? Because, you hear about all these strategies and you're like, oh, well, I can BRRRR and be no money into the deal, or I can take it, creative finance sub 2 and have very little money. And I always tell people, I'm like, bro, if you don't have reserves, you have no business buying a rental, because you get a couple of months of no pay, you get one big repair, you get one piss tenant, like you're literally one like headache that's likely to happen at some point.
Yeah.
From being in a really bad spot.
Yeah. I think you should have, your risk profile needs to correlate with what you can actually afford. Right. So when you're doing your deal analysis, if you say, well, I'm going to have to leave $2,000 in this deal, the first question is, you got $2,000? And then after that you say, okay, maybe it's worth my time or worth my money. But yeah, if you can't cover and shoulder the mortgage on that property yourself, I wouldn't recommend jumping into it and then scaling from there. Now, with the challenge is, the bigger, like we were talking about earlier, the bigger it gets, the easier it gets, because one vacancy isn't 100% of your properties; it's 1% of your property. Okay, that's a little bit easier. Or one big chunk out of someone getting mad on the eviction process, $5,000, $10,000 of damages. Okay, insurance can help there, but everybody knows insurance rates are going through the roof, and they're not exactly enjoyable to work with.
Yeah.
So the first property is the hardest. Distance from 0 to 1, I think distance from 1 to 2 is maybe 20% of that, because it's just such a big hurdle to get over from a mental standpoint, from a logistics, a skill standpoint, and really like the belief side of things. But when I bought my first house, I remember my mortgage was $1,497, and this is the house that I was house hacking.
Got it.
And I rented out each room for $600 a month. And my thought was, well, okay, I'm going to pay rent. I was paying rent of $1,100 a month. So I thought, well, okay, if I have $1,100 a month, can I shoulder an extra $400 a month if nobody, like in my worst case scenario?
Yeah,
yes,
I can't rent it out. Yeah.
Okay, then my worst case scenario is a pretty good worst case scenario. That's how I evaluate properties, and how I'd encourage other people to, is if your mortgage
can you handle
payment
the worst case?
Yeah, if your worst case is $500 a month of negative, because you still have to pay your mortgage.
Yeah,
and it turns out they're not going to let you slide on that. But it's vacant, then I think that's a really good option. Otherwise, you probably need a lower, wholesaling, very low risk in wholesaling, because you're essentially,
you have no debt.
Yeah, you don't have any debt. You don't have any right. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I tell people too. Is I'm like, look, I've been on all risk profiles. Like I've, we got apartments that have hundreds of thousands of dollars in, income and expenses and all these things. Then we have, I've had normal rentals, Airbnbs, which have totally different expense and risk profiles. House flips where I've made tons of money, and then I've also lost tons of money. But like this wholesaling thing, I very rarely ever lose on it. And that's really attractive after you've been through the ringer of real estate.
When you've experienced getting punched in the mouth and you find something that minimizes the blood, you're like, I like that. That's part of the reason I really like the BRRRR model, is with my engineering background, you can science it a lot more than, say, flips, because the market's more dynamic with flips, which can be really nice, but it can also be painful.
Yep.
Whereas BRRRR's, the appraisal process is based on historical information. So you can go back and look at that information and make a reasonable estimation of what the property value is.
As long as you're going to get it fixed up quick, you're pretty certain what your value is going to be.
And again, harder now just because we don't really know where rates are going to go. And we don't know when it's going to go. I guess we've got a decent idea of what direction, but we don't know when.
Yeah.
So, it's just, it adds some complexity there. But, the difficulty is what makes it so valuable for people like you and me. If we focus on building the skill, we get the reward.
Yeah.
We get the money.
You know what cracks me up is like the idea of house hacking. Because my first house too, you know, I had roommates, and I had roommates throughout college and baseball. Like I've always had roommates. And so I was just like, well, yeah, of course we're going to get roommates to like afford this house. Like, duh. And it's just funny to me that like, it's like this big thing now of like, oh yeah, we're going to house. I'm like, yeah, of course you are.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't know that's what it was. And
I
then
know.
I was like, it's got a name. Cool.
Yeah, it wasn't called. I was like, well, yeah, you get roommates when you're young and broke. Like, of course.
Yeah. Well, and that, you know, there's a little bit more inconvenience. Like, it turns out if, you know, like right now, my wife and my baby boy and our boy that's coming here in a couple months, they don't want a house hack.
Yeah.
You know, like,
of course.
You know, you've got options. So for people that are maybe younger and feel like, man, I don't have the income power that I will when I'm 40 or 50 or whatnot. Well, you do have some luxuries. Like take what's given to you and run with it.
What do you think about the other ways that people are doing this now to try and generate cash flow, like Airbnb or, you know, true like co-living and stuff? Like, what are your thoughts on everything there?
You know, my thoughts on this go back to what you were talking about with strategies. Like, there's 1,000 ways to make tons of money in real estate. Honestly, if you just focus on one, you can make a ton of money. It might not even be the perfect one for you, and then you can iterate to the perfect one, like the one that minimizes the blood, you know, but you at least start with one, you get pretty good at it, and then you add more to your tool belt. For me, short-term rentals, I'm not as interested in just because it's hospitality. I don't see it as real estate. It's more hospitality because you're creating an experience for people.
Yeah.
It's more upfront cost, more volatile cash flow, and there's the legislative variability.
There's a lot of risk legislatively.
Yeah, you just don't know. And, you know, and of course it's sexy to say that right now because it boomed and it's kind of corrected a little bit, but that's always been my feeling on it. Yeah, it could be really good for cash flow. Awesome. But lots of people that I talk to say, I want to get a short-term rental because I want a place in the mountains that I can go. I was like, well, yeah, but that's not what a short-term rental, that's a vacation home, you know? So you could use it here and there, but so short-term rental arbitrage is really interesting. I don't want to do it because it just seems like I actually just brought on a new student who said I did short-term rental arbitrage, but then legislation changed and I'm like out of luck. You know, I built this entire business model based on this, and then they changed all the rules and I can't do anything.
Yeah.
And the skills that he built are still really valuable, but
yeah, I can tell you as somebody who got into Airbnb back in 2017. So I've been doing it now 8 years and I still have a few. But it was way before everybody else was like talking about it, doing it. And I looked at it the same way that the first person you said did of like, oh, I want a house in the mountains. I literally was like, I want a house in the mountains. I want to like snowboard and go in nature and all this stuff. And so I did. And then I saw the numbers and I was like, I mean, dude, back then I was buying houses for $200,000 in the mountains, like California, 6 stuff.
That's insane.
And my mortgage was $1,300. It was renting for $4,000. And I was like, this is like the golden.
I'm a freaking genius.
I'm like, why does everyone not do this?
Yeah,
like literally, this was my thought. And I was like, I'm gonna buy them all. So I bought 10, and dude, I killed it for years. And it was truly appreciation and massive cash flow. But then laws started to change.
Yeah,
they said, hey, you can only own one. Now, granted, I got grandfathered in, but still, I was like, well, that's not good for the market overall. Like that's going to decrease demand. And I was actually talking to my agent the other day because I'm trying to sell off my last couple. And she was like, yeah, the market's pretty soft here because people can't even break even now up here. Like with the rates and everything else and the market softening for Airbnb, and this is in Big Bear, California, by the way. She's like, the demand's definitely not like there like it was. And I was like, that makes sense because if somebody's looking at buying my homes right now and they're looking at this new law that says they can only own one, period. So there's no scale. So they're looking at it truly as a vacation home at this point because they can't build a business around it.
Or their primary residence, like your addressable market just shrank.
It shrank a lot. Yeah. And so thankfully I sold off a bunch, because I kind of like had foresight. But also too, she's like, but even now with the prices, I mean, that house I bought for $200,000 is now worth $500K.
Yeah.
and it's like it doesn't cash flow at 500K because the or not the mortgage, but the rent has not gone up. It's still 4,000. 8 years later.
Yeah.
Because there's just more competition. It's softer. I mean, back when I was doing it 8 years ago, we were the only fish in town. It was like, dude, this house is sick.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with Airbnb, my disposition is if you can get close to break even as a long-term rental, that's your protection for legislative changes. And if you can shoulder that negative $300, $400, $500 a month with your active income, whatever, cool, awesome. But if you're concerned about legislative changes, that's one way to protect yourself.
Yeah.
I also think legislative changes generally don't happen very fast. So if it's being proposed and you think it's going to pass, or you're well connected and you understand kind of the culture of that market, you probably want to get out of it before those things pass so that you can monetize it better. But yeah, that's just it seems more hands-on than I really wanted to be.
Also, what I'll say too is the wear and tear was like tremendous.
Really.
And I don't know if it's because, I mean, obviously lots of people going in and out, but I think also too we're in a harsh climate up there where it snows a lot, it's cold, and people are snowboarding, bringing crap in the house, and like all this gear, and so it's like after 5 years, this house is like needs another remodel.
Yeah. Do you end up managing those yourself? Because I know short-term property managers.
That's a whole nother thing.
They'll take 30, 50%.
Yep. A lot of short-term managers like 20, 30, 40%. So it's funny. Originally, I managed myself because I was like, I just want to learn what this is. And honestly, short-term managers weren't really that big back then. So, and then I ran the math because there was one guy who was doing it. And he was like, yeah, it's 30% to manage. I'm like, I wouldn't make anything if I paid you 30. Like, that doesn't make sense. So, I ended up managing it. I realized it's actually pretty freaking easy to manage. And this was like way before all the tools that are available today. I mean, I was literally managing it myself, like pretty easily, like an hour a week. And then eventually I hired somebody else to do it. So I built my own in-house management. And then it's kind of cool because she was managing my properties. And I don't remember, I think I paid her 10% maybe. I can't remember. I think 10%. But because she was so successful with mine, she ended up starting her own management company. And so she doesn't take other clients for 10, but that's what she's been doing. And, I think she's got like 40 homes or something.
Yeah.
So she's doing great.
Hey, good for her.
Yeah.
Work with good people, train them, let them do their thing. Yeah.
I actually wholesaled them their first one up there too.
That's awesome.
Because she sees it. She's like, I want to buy one here. I'm looking for a deal. And then I'm always looking for deals. And so we got one. I was like, you know what? I was going to take this one, but we'll wholesale it to you guys. And it killed it for them.
So are you focusing more on wholesaling right now, flipping right now?
I am focused on wholesale majority. I would say, we're locking up 20 to 30 deals a month, and they're majority nationwide wholesales. So, we're never seeing these properties. We're closing them all virtually. Nationwide has a lot of pros and cons. The cost per lead nationwide is significantly less than doing locally. And it's kind of funny because, you're talking about these like 50,000 markets. I love those markets for wholesale because when we go to these sellers, nobody markets to them.
That's a good point.
No one markets to them. So they're so easy to freaking lock up. Dude, I bet we could sell your students so many deals because
Let's do it.
We're getting all these 50 to 100K markets and just locking up deals like gangbusters. Now, the problem is it's hard to find buyers in those markets because there's less demand and all those things. So, there's trade-offs versus Vegas. It's the same as the market where it's like there's cash flow or there's appreciation. It's like there's either super easy to lock up deals but hard to sell deals, or it's super hard to lock up deals. Like Vegas is super hard to get deals, but if you have a deal, is
quick,
easy to sell. So there's no perfect market, but for me, I would say 90+% of what I do now is wholesale. I will still flip. Like you were with me when I was on the call with some of my lenders and stuff. So, I've got a couple luxury flips. We got some normal flips, but man, back in my heyday, I would have 50 to 70 flips going at all times, active. And now I have 10 max. I don't want the debt.
Yeah, carrying the high interest debt, especially with
Yeah, I
price
watched the
volatility
market
rate
turn,
yeah.
and I'm like, never again, dude. I'm not carrying that much debt. I want to make the same amount of money with no risk.
Now you've been in this a while. I know I can't remember who you were talking to. I was listening to a conversation where you said, like I'm a baby. I really respect people that have gone through multiple different cycles.
Yeah.
Is this like your first big market cycle? Like what's been your takeaway from it?
Well, I got started in 2010, so I started right at the end, like the end of the worst, that we saw. And it's interesting because when I got in at 2010, I'm 21 years old, young realtor, not investing. Dude, every house in Vegas, the average price was $100,000. It was crazy, dude. And I thought that was normal. I was just like, this is what houses cost. And back then we had over the 1% rule. The house was $100,000. It could rent for like $1,200 in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And I'm watching Blackstone and all these guys buy up these houses at the auction like gangbusters, dude. And I just remember hating real estate because I was a realtor trying to sell these $100,000 homes and no one wanted them. Literally. Nobody could get a loan. Everybody had gone through bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sale, whatever. So nobody had money. Nobody could buy a house. And they're all scared of real estate because it had just tanked. And I'm like, guys, it can't really drop anymore. Like, it can't be free. Like, I don't see how you could lose buying this. You could buy it right now for 120, and I don't see how you would lose. And BlackRock and Blackstone, all these guys thought the same. They're like, we literally cannot lose buying these houses right now. They were paying above market value at the auctions because they could not buy them fast enough. They were like, we literally want to buy every house because we have a 10-year horizon. Why are we trying to negotiate 10 grand, 20 grand? This thing's going to be worth $300,000-$400,000 by the time we're done with it. And they were right. They had a 10-year horizon and they absolutely crushed it. So for me, I watched that. I watched everybody so fearful during that time. I watched myself hate being a realtor because even if I could sell something, the commission was $3,000.
Yeah. You bust your butt,
dude.
And you're like $3,000. And then your brokerage is taking.
Yeah. They're taking money. 20%. And I'm like getting this person such a crazy deal. And it's like, I made $2,000, $3,000 for this crazy deal. So I got sour on real estate, quit, started flipping couches, all that crap. And then 2015, I get back into it, but this time as the buyer. So I start flipping houses and I realize I can get hard money and private money. And so I went through just 2015 to 2018, just flipping. That's all I did. No wholesales, flip everything, killed it. 2018 was my first like slight market cycle where they raised rates in 2018 at the end of the year. And I actually saw that for the first time flipping houses like affect it. It wasn't nearly like what happened in 22, but I watched properties not sell, slightly dip, and I lost money. Like nothing to the degree, like, some properties lost just because I was hold time.
Well, up until that point, you don't.
I never
go
lost.
Up, so you're
I
like,
literally never lost.
This is easy. What are all these schmucks sitting on the side for?
I'm like, dude, I'm like 200 for 200 right now.
Yeah.
I was. And then, I took some L's for the first time. I was like, okay, that was brutal. Not going to let that happen again. Wrong. So, from 2018, whatever, right? 2019 to 2020, COVID hits and everybody's freaking out. And I have 50 properties and I'm like, I might freaking hedge my bets and start doing some content and YouTube and stuff. And so I did that, but I was still flipping at a high level. And obviously the market went nuts. So, I go on this run for like 4 years of just killing it. And then 2022 hits with doubling the interest rates. And that was when I got crushed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose millions of dollars on this. Like I paid back all my investors and whatever, but I was like, I ain't doing that again. I'm not going to have 50 to 70 flips anymore. It's just not worth the headache.
Yeah.
I know how to make money now in many different ways. Not going to do this. And so I moved to like majority wholesale and all that.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about you is like you're really transparent with like it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like there's like I over the last since investing for a while, kind of a point of pride for me was I've never lost money on a deal. And then I could start thinking, well, if I haven't lost money on a deal, maybe I'm not trying hard, or like maybe I'm not
aggressive enough.
Yeah, aggressive enough. So I took a couple L's and so at that point I started learning there's a big mindset component to this, like managing your mindset, kind of like the professional athlete, which is lock in, it's next play or it's next pitch, whatever. I'm interested from your baseball experience. How do you manage the stress or the loss, the mindset side of things to continue to keep going the way that you have?
When you take L's?
Yeah. You get punched in the mouth and you keep going,
Well, so here's the thing, right? So I'll answer 2 questions. The first was, what did you learn from all of it? And then, like, how do you deal with failure? What did I learn from all of it was that it's funny, dude. Like, I don't want to ever be super extreme, but I used to be very extreme where it was like, oh, well, debt's good, and you see these people like, that's the best thing ever. And I'm like, yeah, it's made me wealthy doing debt. And then I saw
doing debt.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's go do some debt.
Yeah, like, let's get it. As much debt as we can. This is awesome. And then, you've got like an extremist like Ramsey, who I've gotten to interview and know now. And like, he's like, debt's bad. No debt. And then it's like, I'm like, you don't know. And then, you lose and you're like, I kind of don't want debt.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not so extreme that I'll never take on debt. But I'm also like, I'm like very much more even keeled. So I would say today I'm way more even keeled. But I will say I was way lazier before than I am now with my thought process. So what happened before was, I'd just been flipping for so long that you just get complacent. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I could run this business in my sleep. So I'm not paying attention to the market. I'm not like trying to innovate. I'm just like, yeah, do what we do. We're going to make millions. And then the market turns and you're like, I have to innovate or else I might lose it all.
I have to innovate in a week.
Yeah. So you start innovating and doing different things. I start marketing differently. We start wholesaling. We start doing innovations. We start doing everything. And then like, I would say I spent all of last year in 2024 innovating the entire model to now do different forms of advertising with Facebook, change the process from only going Las Vegas to all across the country, revamp our scripts to now being able to close over the phone on every single deal, how we dispo properties at scale in lots of places that we'd have no buyers. And how do we do that? So it's like, I completely changed the model and innovated it all. And today it's funny because the model is significantly better. Like right now, last month, this month, we'll have spent about $40K a month in marketing, and we're going to go do over 200,000 each month. This month we could hit 300,000. We'll see. But it's like, man, that's pretty similar to what we were doing flipping. We would do like 300,000 a month, give or take. But I would spend like 60, 70K a month in marketing, and I would take on all the risk having to flip the house to get that return. So like I look at today, I'm like, my business is way better today. And we're in still a way worse market than we were in 2-3 years ago, where, dude, anybody could make money. Just buy a house and you make money.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, I'm really happy with where the business is today. And I'm proud of like all the pivots and changes we made along the way. But it was painful, man. It was really hard to get to that point. And there was a lot of points where I would assume most people wouldn't have gotten through it and made it. Like I know a lot of flippers that got washed out. I know a lot of buy and hold people who have gotten washed out. And like, it's really hard in a market correction. And I actually had somebody tell me this, but these last 2 years, 23 and 24, he's like, these are going to be the hardest real estate years of your life. And I was like, really?
That's crazy.
I was like, you think harder than 08? Like everybody says that was the worst. He's like, harder than 08. And I was like, why? He's like, well, there's less transactions. 08 had more transactions than 23 and 24.
Yeah.
And there's way more houses today than there were then. And it's like, yeah, you think about how we wholesale, flip, lenders, everybody survives off transactions. It's not necessarily price. We need to see a volume of deals. Like that's how everyone makes money. Realtors don't make money if no one buys or sells.
Right.
Lenders don't, flippers don't, wholesalers don't. We need volume. And he's like, yeah, that'll never happen again, that low of volume.
That's wild. Yeah, it's wild to think of it being the most challenging, because I even tell my students, like, I'm so proud and impressed of them because they're closing on deals, they're doing great. And I think if you can do it now,
oh yeah,
you'll crush it.
That's what I'm saying. Yep.
It also, it creates the mental fortitude of, remember that time that it was an absolute mess?
Yep.
And I figured it out. Like, I think we could probably figure this out too.
Oh, when the market's hot and volume is happening, I mean, everything gets easier. You know, when we're wholesaling, it's going to get so easy to find buyers for our deals because everybody's going to want to buy deals. You know, buy and hold people will be more active when rates go down. They're like, oh, dude, like now these things finally make sense. I can buy it at this price and it still makes sense. Like it helps everyone with volume and rates and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I learned to never get complacent, to always keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the market, constantly innovate, try to improve your process and everything else. But I would say how you deal with, you know, L's and failure, dude. I mean, I've taken so many L's in my life. I mean, like if I was to just only look at my L's, it'd be like, how the heck are you even, why would anyone listen to you? For real. It's like, you know, you spend your whole life trying to play baseball. It doesn't end up working out. You launch a bunch of businesses, a bunch fail. You deal with lawsuits. You deal with losing on lots and lots of deals, you know, and it's like you just start laying out all the L's and you're like, yeah, why would anyone listen to this guy? Right. But it's because of all the L's that the wins are like significantly higher than that because I'm willing to take a risk and try and innovate and try new things. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't work out. But that's the only way to find out what does.
Yeah.
You have to try. You have to be willing to fail. And I learned that in baseball. It's like you get a hit 7 out of 3 or 3 out of 10 times. It's like, you're great.
Yeah.
But that means 7 times you got out and it didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there like practical things in these high anxiety stress moments, like any practical things that you do to like, do you do the morning routine thing or the, you know, the meditation, or I know you're reading your Bible and you're praying and stuff like that, but what are the practical things you do?
I think it's all faith.
Yeah.
I really think that even for Christians, right? So you're a believer and it's like, even when we know God, when things are good, that's like usually when we ignore him the most. Because we're like, oh, things are wrong. Like, I don't, it's all good. Like, yeah, God, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to just keep doing this. This is great. Like all my effort is now paying off. And then
I'm killing it. Thanks for helping.
Thanks for playing a little bit of a role and helping me, you know, creating me. So, but then, you know, when things struggle, you're like, I don't know what to do. God, I need you to bail me out. Like, help me out. Help me find the solution. And so, unfortunately, for most believers, we run to God when things are hard and we kind of ignore him when things are good. And so I've just realized that I need to seek him all the time through all the trials and through the wins. And so I would just say, like, throughout the last couple of years, it's just been one trial after another, constantly. Different business, different problem, just constant for the last literally almost 2.5 years. And I think about it now and I'm like, wow, this has been lasting way longer than I was thinking it would last. I thought, man, maybe this was going to be a rough year.
Yeah.
No, it's been like 2.5 years. And then people will be like, well, it seems like everything's going good. And I'm like, bro, it's like really hard. But I think every business owner's having a really hard time in this time because it's just adjusting everywhere. It's not real estate, just real estate. Every company, man, think about every company right now with tariffs.
Oh yeah.
Dude, if your whole business is based on importing and exporting right now.
In any capacity.
What do you do? Like, you could have built the best business ever. And then yesterday.
How do you price? Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, for me, I've just kind of accepted that I need to have a level of, the best way to say it is dependence on God in the good and the bad, and have this level of just like, I'm going to constantly seek and pray and listen and, you know, have peace no matter what the situation is. And the only way to do that is with him. But then I also want to have a healthy, I don't want to even use the word fear because we shouldn't ever live in fear, but I want to have like a healthy
respect, maybe.
Respect is a good word. Paranoia is not really the word, but like this healthy thing of like, you know what? Anything could change at any moment. Like, I'm just ready. I'm always on guard. I'm ready that anything, like, okay, a good analogy would be for the Christians, you know, like David, when he's out running from Saul and man, dude, this guy is like constantly on defense and everything for like 10 years in caves, just waiting to be attacked and like conquering. And it's like, this dude is just surrounded by his enemies and everything. But he's just like on fear, but he's depending on God. He's believing, he's trusting. So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. That's, I think that's, at least from my story, that's been something hard to adjust to, because I think when you're young and you don't have that seasoned perspective of life, you've got kind of this impenetrability, or you think you're invulnerable. And so I think, well, God will just do everything. And then you get punched in the mouth by life in a couple ways. Like we've lost 2 babies in the last 18 months. And one of them Cooper was around 11 weeks. And so one of the ways that my wife, who is the most remarkable woman, wanted to honor Cooper was to deliver him. And so instead of going to have a DNC or whatnot, so she delivered him and we held him in our hands. And so we buried him. Like I buried my son. And that was part of the reason I even ask about it, is I had to learn so much through there, like even basic needs like get sun, exercise, drink water, rest, things like that. And going through that, then I said, okay, well, I guess it's all on me, and then kind of coming to the middle of full dependence on God. But because of that, go hustle and go work so hard in order to honor what he's given, the talents that he gave you.
Yep.
It's just, I think is really, really interesting. I think it's easy sometimes for believers to say, well, if God wants to do it, it'll happen. And then we just kind of abdicate, and especially, following up on your conversation with David Green, sometimes the single guys are just like, well, God will just put the girl in front of me. I was like, well, you might have to go out and get shut down a few times and feel like an idiot for a while.
Yeah, it's like, well, I don't know. It hasn't happened yet. Usually God's pretty good about these things.
I think he'll take care of it,
We don't see many examples in the Bible of people waiting forever to get married.
Yeah.
So I always relate things back to the Bible, even in those situations. But I think about people who don't believe, and I think about how hard it is. So like even for anyone listening to this right now, right? Let's say you're not religious, you don't believe, and you're going through a hard time. I really don't know what to tell them, because if you don't believe, then everything revolves around you. And you are the source of fixing the problem. And in most cases, you are the reason the problem even happened. So clearly
you're not helping.
Like you don't probably make the best decisions. And so one thing I've thought about a lot is like, well, thankfully, I already know I'm dumb. I do stupid things all the time. I make mistakes all the time. But thankfully, I have the Holy Spirit inside of me who has infinite power, infinite knowledge, infinite innovation, infinite creativity to solve the problem. And I'm also surrounded by the promises of God since I'm a believer, right? And I really love Romans 8:28, where he says that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. I say this verse all the time because it says that in all things, God will work it for your good if you are a believer. So a lot of people will be like, well, I think it'll solve itself. The universe will solve it. And I'm like, no. Why would you think that? Where would you get that belief from? Like, that's your own religion belief of like me. I just think the universe will solve it. And it's like, well, I don't. That's nowhere ever, right? Yeah. But if I'm a believer because of all the evidence for Jesus and all these things, then I'm going to believe that promise where he's like, no, if you're a believer, I will still work everything for your good. So like the way that I now interpret this, and I used to not think about it this way before. I used to be like, hey, if there's bad things happening in my life, it's because God is trying to show me a lesson. And, he's going to see me through it, obviously. And like, it's all for my good. Like he put me through this hard time to teach me this lesson. It's great. I actually don't believe that anymore. What I actually believe is we put ourselves in hard situations by making stupid choices and doing dumb things. But because God is so good, he still ends up working it out for our good. So I think that like, had I been more intentional and everything else, I could have saw the market shifting. I could have not made those mistakes on flipping those houses. And I think I could have like avoided a lot of the problems. If I would have paid attention and listened to God, I think I could have avoided starting some businesses that ended up being headaches and everything else, right? I don't think that God was the reason that I started it or did it. It was probably my flesh seeing an opportunity and then just wanting to do it.
Yeah.
But even though I make mistakes and do dumb things, God still is going to say, you know what, dude, it could have been way easier if you would have just listened to me and not did these things. Like, that would have been the better solution, but I'm going to still use it for your good.
Yeah, it's difficult to ascribe in the moment why something's happening. And we really want to, because that's like, we want to create a narrative and a story in our head. And a lot of times when we say, oh, well, this is a good thing that God is giving me to make me better, sometimes it's not. Like, so for example, burying my son, was that my fault? Was it my wife's fault? Well, if he says he'll only give you, does a father give his son a snake? No.
Yeah.
When he asks for bread.
Yep.
Well, as I was talking with my pastor, who I really admire and appreciate, and he's just a shepherd to his core, I said, so if he says he won't give you anything but good, why did my kid die?
Yeah.
Not as like a poke, like, hey, you Christian, yeah. But like genuinely, like, that's not good. He's pro-life. He loves life, and he said the best way, because he's got some hard stuff in his story too. He said the best way I can understand is that if it's not good, he didn't give it to you. He can make good out of it.
Yep.
But
exactly,
and he will make good out of it because he works everything for your good.
Yep.
But if for people that maybe they don't follow Jesus, or they don't, like, I also bring some comfort from thinking of worst case scenarios, like we talked about earlier. We live in the wealthiest generation in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Our medical advancements, everything, like being homeless in the United States, as undesirable as that is, it's better than other places. And so, like, your worst case scenario in the United States is a pretty good.
People still want to be here.
When I started investing in real estate as a bachelor, I said, my worst case scenario is I sleep on buddy's couch, or I guess my worst case is I go back to my parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a pretty good worst case scenario.
That's what I thought about too when I flipped my first house. I was like, so if this doesn't work out, what happens? I just took out like $50K in credit cards. Like, what happens?
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm 25. I think I'd just go bankrupt and like try again.
And it goes away. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I was like, that's not too bad.
Yeah. And
that was it.
Initially, you think, you're like, well, I could go bankrupt. Well, yeah. That's actually one thing that I think is so healthy when you say, what if? If you just answer the question, it makes it so much more consumable. Like, what if this happened? Well, I'd go bankrupt. What happens if you go bankrupt? Well, your credit takes a hit. It's embarrassing. You got an ego check, but you're still alive. You're still going to
I can still go do deals.
Right.
Like,
you can still go learn new skills. You could still love your loved ones. It's a pretty good worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So
that's how I thought about it.
Yeah.
And even today, it's like, man, if I was to lose everything, what would happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, it would suck. It would be embarrassing. It'd be an ego thing, like you said. Like, there'd be a lot that it would do, but what happens? Well, I already know I have skills to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll figure out how to make it back. I'll figure out how to learn from it. Like, it is what it is. And I'll probably make it back faster than before, just because skills stack and
compound. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I guess, I want to be a better steward, and I want to not take L's, and, I want to learn from all the L's I've taken so far. But, in the end, do I think that whatever the last L was is the last L? No.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's going to be more. And especially as you try to do bigger things that you've never done before, you're going to make more and more mistakes, and the mistakes will be bigger. That's just what happens when you do big things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was watching, they were showing Elon Musk as like Elon lost $30 billion of net worth today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you can only lose $30 billion of net worth if
you got it.
you got a massive net worth, right? So it's like, they're just numbers. It's just a percentage, So that's something that also I keep in perspective. It's like, yeah, I've made like big mistakes, and but you can't make big mistakes unless you're doing big things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I'm making small mistakes and doing small things, like, well, yeah, I mean, that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So I think about that. You also brought up something that I've never talked about publicly. I've been sharing it with our Wealthy Kingdom team, but it's just this idea of, you're talking about your baby and why it happened and everything else. And I love what your pastor said about, if it ain't good, it ain't God. Because something I've been really thinking about a lot is healing and health. Because over the last 6 months, man, I don't know how to say this like without ego, but like I've prayed over a lot of people and have seen many miraculous healings, cancer, different things. And that never happened for the first 30 some years of my life. And it was only after I got deeper in faith and, you know, I believe that God blessed me with the spiritual gift of healing, like recently. And so I've been trying to like read through the Bible and understand how this gift works biblically, because, you know, what happens when you pray over somebody and it doesn't happen, right? And I'm sure that's something you like asked yourself many times, like, man, like we prayed and it didn't work. Why? And like you see kind of like, once again, we're like now getting back to why extremes are bad. You see two extreme views on this situation with believers. One view is, well, you know what? Sometimes God just says no, and he has a greater purpose for why that happened, and we don't understand it yet, but we will one day. I would say that that's probably like the majority view. Then maybe you have like a hyper charismatic Pentecostal view where it's like, well, you just, you know, it was either your sin or, you know, you lacked faith or something to that regard, right? And I've just been like trying to theologically break this down, and I have a conclusion, and it kind of aligns with your pastor. I think that bad things happen not because God wants them to happen. I think it's just a result of sin in the world. Not your sin specifically or anything else, but just there's sin.
Fracturing of the way that God intended the world.
Yeah, the world has sin. Bad things happen. We know that Satan is the prince of this world. He wants to see destruction and bad things happen. That's why it does. Nothing more, right? They asked the blind guy in the Bible, like, man, why is this guy blind? Was it his parents' sin? Was it his sin? He's like, no, he was just born this way. But you know what? We're going to fix it, and it's going to glorify me. You know, it wasn't anyone's sin. It's just he was born this way because we live in a world with sin. So it's like, okay, that's why just any problem in the world exists today. That's number one. Number two, okay, well, what does God want? Well, I think God wants everyone to be healed. I think he wants everyone to be restored. I mean, when you look throughout the Bible, not in no case does God ever say no to a healing. Jesus healed everybody who asked and who had faith. So this is like where it starts to get a little controversial because, you know, Jesus healed all these people who wanted to be healed. They're like, Jesus, I heard this Jesus guy is healing people. Like, you know, can you heal us? Like they're demonstrating a level of faith. And we knew that Jesus had perfect faith. He could heal anyone. He possessed all the gifts. But you do see points where Jesus does not heal because essentially he can't. So in one scenario, he goes back to his hometown and it literally says that like Jesus was shocked by the amount of unbelief in his home city and he was not able to heal people there. And it's like, what the heck is going on here? How is like Jesus, the Son of God, not able to heal somebody? And I think it's because that person had unwillingness to be healed. They did not want to be. They, you know, in some, you know, however you want to describe it, had no faith, lacked faith. Because think about it, I mean, these people lived with Jesus the first 30 years of his life. He never showed any miraculous things until he got the Holy Spirit. Yeah,
if you see someone at 3 years old.
Yeah.
And they grow up to be someone famous. You're like, he's not that famous.
Yeah, so like they didn't believe that he could do it. And, you know, it's just this thing where it's like, so there is this level of basically like a two-person system where the person who is praying also must have great faith and believe, because we know that the disciples also healed people and everything else. And we also know that the disciples struggled to heal certain people because of a lack of faith. They themselves just didn't have strong enough faith to heal certain things or to cast out certain demons. This is crazy. I'm talking about this on a rental podcast. But anyways, if you're still here. So we know that faith is required of the person praying and, you know, trying to heal. We know that to some degree, there has to be some kind of willingness to want to be healed, that it could work. And I think that people be like, well, Jesus didn't heal people who were only Christians. I'd say, yeah, you're right. But those people did at least, they were receptive to him praying over them, to, you know, it potentially working. They may not have believed him yet, but they're like, you know what? I'll take a prayer. And we see many non-believers like that who are like, I'm like, dude, can I pray for you? I know you don't, but can I at least, like that's showing at least some level of faith.
Yeah.
And so long story short, the question really comes down to why don't people get healed every single time, right? If somebody has the gift of healing, why doesn't it happen? And there's only basically two conclusions that you can come to. Does God just pick and choose when he wants to heal? Meaning he's doesn't want to heal some people and others he does? Or is it on the people and it's due to a lack of faith? Not by one specific person, but either the receiver or the person praying. And I think it's that. I think the Bible says it's due to a lack of faith.
That is so interesting because I've heard some wild stuff. Like I did some work. I think we talked about this in Northeast India, and like some of my buddies that went on the trip after me, they were very Southern Baptist. Like
they're going to be on the side of, well, you don't know why God did that.
Yeah, or like that stuff doesn't exist even.
Well,
and
they don't understand.
Right.
Yeah.
One of them went and they saw a deaf guy get healed.
Yep.
And he came back with almost kind of some PTSD. He was like, I don't understand. Like, I don't have a category for that.
Yep.
It is wild.
Yep. Dude, I've seen demons cast out. I've seen all the things that you read about in the Bible.
Yeah.
So they're 100% still happening today. And I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, so I never saw it or thought it or anything. But like kind of what I'm getting at to conclude this thought, because I don't want it to be like misclipped or anything, is, okay, so Ryan, are you saying like this happens to everybody because of they just lack faith? And what I am going to say is like, there's a reason only certain people truly see miracles in different things, right? It's like, I think a lot of people who are Christians operate without very much power at all. Like people will be like, man, can you pray for me? And it's like, people are like, yeah, sure. And it's like, just nice.
Right. Yeah.
Like we just know based on what the Bible says that not all prayers created equal. They're not. Certain people pray with much more faith than others. Even the disciples, like Thomas is like, I don't believe. I need to see Jesus to believe. And Jesus is like, well, here I am, dude. It sucks that you don't have strong enough faith to believe without having to go through this. He's like, blessed are those who believe without seeing. They have stronger faith. And it's like, there's a reason Peter was the leader and Paul was they just had such stronger faith. Like Peter's like, I'll walk on the water to Jesus. I believe it. None of the other disciples believed it. And so, you just see like levels of faith playing out. And, if Jesus displayed perfect faith, it's like he batted 1,000 on healing anyone that wanted it. Like we just see no incidents in the Bible of God not healing when like we just don't, it's just not there where he's like, you know what? No.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's from a faith perspective, it's encouraging to know that he won't leave you or forsake you.
Yeah.
He will be there. Now, it might not look how you thought it was going to look with the billions and the yachts and all that stuff. Or in my case, it might not look like me having 4 kids. 2 of them might be in heaven already.
Yep.
But
and they are.
I just trust that he's going to work, like he said, he's going to work all things for good for me.
And that's the last part of this. So even if it doesn't work out, even if the prayer doesn't work and the person isn't healed or the baby isn't resurrected or whatever the case is, he's still going to work it for our good, regardless. And it's like, that's the beauty of it. Win, lose, or draw, it's still going to be for our good. But I actually do believe that if people operated with more faith, the Bible tells us that a lot of these bad things that happen, they can be fixed with faith. But we need to start all operating with the belief that it actually can happen, that it is possible, because the American church just doesn't really believe it because no one's seen it. It's like the guy sees the deaf guy heal. He's just like, that's what happened to me, by the way. I actually saw a miracle and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then it like unlocked a new level of faith.
Yeah.
So that's why I share it now. It's like, hopefully it unlocks new levels of faith and, people who are listening that like, no, this stuff is very, very real. And if you don't believe it, that means you don't have faith. Like that's the point that I'm trying to make to people. There are lots of Christians who are listening to what I'm saying and they're like, I don't believe that. You are literally saying, I don't have faith. I don't believe those things still happen today. And I would say, you don't read your Bible.
Yeah. And a lot of times they don't have faith or they don't believe in those things until they see it and they're like, what?
How do I explain that?
You know? Yeah. But one of the things I think is so healthy from a cultural perspective is leaders in business and all over the place being more authentic with who they are. I think that's been a big part of your journey, and just saying, look, this is who I am. And it allows people who are following you or see you to say, that's my kind of person, you know, and I want to be like them. And even all over the political landscape, economic landscape, people saying like, this is what I think is legit. And we can even disagree on that.
Yeah.
You know, and still not hate each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me add one other thing it's just so I want to whenever it comes to faith and Christianity, I always want to make sure that the full context is given. I tell my team this all the time. I'm like, you got to include the whole thing. Don't just take a little clip. But one thing I want to make clear is so when I say that the Christians listen to us who don't believe, don't have faith, I'm not saying they're not actual believers. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is they have tiny faith.
Right.
You know, when you first get saved, you know, you have saving faith. You believe. And then Paul tells us you know, you're a baby Christian. You actually it's great. You're now, you have very little faith. You're brand new. But during the sanctification process, your faith keeps growing. You know, during your experiences, your faith should ideally grow. You should go from drinking milk to eating solid food, he says. And so that's what I would challenge anyone listening here. It's I'm not saying you aren't saved or you aren't a believer because you don't believe that, you know, miracles and healings and demons and all this stuff still happen today. I am telling you they happen. You just have to start seeking it and believing that it's possible. And then in turn, that's going to increase your faith.
Yeah. 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 That's a good word.
Well, dude, that's a good way to end it.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on, man, sharing your story about rentals and everything else. How can somebody connect with you if they want to start buying rentals and everything else?
You can find me on socials at Blake Choisnet. That last name is C-H.
Choisnet.
Yeah, Choisnet. Or you can go to 90dayrentalroadmap.com.
Is it 90 with a 90?
90, yeah.
90-day rental
roadmap.com. Yeah.
Cool. So guys, you want to go buy rental properties in these cash flowing markets, which are obviously, like we were talking about, really hard to find. That's the spot to go. So go check it out and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.